Hello and welcome back to Budget Bicycling. Today we're going to be discussing beginner mountain bikes. Now, before we start, I'm just going to classify what we're looking for when we look at beginner mountain bikes. We're looking for hardtails because full suspension bikes require maintenance and upkeep that's really expensive, especially for a budget-minded cyclist like yourself. We're also looking at hardtails because they're more cost-effective and the cost up front will be lower as mentioned earlier, the cost of maintenance will also be lower. So we're looking for bikes with front suspension, disc brakes, preferably hydraulics, but linear pull disc brakes are acceptable at this price range. And we're looking at bikes from $500 to $700 or $800. We're also going to be looking at some used bikes today, but let's just get started with the Specialized Men's Pitch Sport. Now, I chose this bike to show you guys because I own a Specialized Rockhopper, and I can say that it's been a great bike. Mine is the Rockhopper Sport, and while I have upgraded it, it has hydraulic disc brakes from the factory, an 8x3 Acera Altus drivetrain from Shimano, and a Suntour XCT front suspension fork, which I'm planning on upgrading shortly, and I'll make a video on that. I really like the bike, and I ride mostly cross-country, and for my needs, it's really cool. I chose the Pitch to show you guys because it's slightly cheaper, and it has most of the same componentry, except I believe that it has linear pull disc brakes, and some of the parts aren't branded Specialized in-house brand Stout. I believe most of them are just, generic seat posts, stem, bars, etc. But yeah, let's look at some of the specs. So it has an Acera, an 11 to 34 tooth cassette, a Acera Suntour 27.5 inch fork. So this is a 650B or 27.5 inch bike, and it has 80 and 100 millimeters of size specific hydraulic damped suspension and rebound, which is really cool. We can now look at the specs. So it comes with a KMC chain, square taper bottom bracket, Stout forged alloy 3x8 crankset, which I believe is the same one on the 2018 Rockhopper, which I own. Altus front derailleur, 11 to 34 tooth Sunrace 8-speed. I believe this is the same cassette that is found on the Rockhopper. An Acera 8-speed. I actually quite like the Acera. It's better than a Tourney for sure, and it's better than the Altus, but it's not really a Livio, so you want to shoot for a Livio or even Dior as much as possible, but Acera is acceptable. Lock-on grips, which is always a bonus at this price range. The Henge Sport saddle, I find extremely comfortable. It's similar to a Brooks saddle. For the first few days, it's really terrible, but then after that, it really grows on you, and you just have to give it a few days. I was considering replacing it, but I'd rather spend money on more important upgrades, and the saddle works really nicely for me. It comes with the Ground Control Sport tires, which I'm not a huge fan of. I upgraded mine to some WTB Wolverines, which I'll be posting a video on in the future. So it has a Specialized alloy 9-degree backsweep 15mm rise bars. So again, none of the Stout branded bars and stem, etc. But, at least they are decent, and at least they're not from a weird off-brand like you'll see on some cheaper bikes at this price range. Mechanical disc brakes, the Shimano BR M375s. I actually tested these on a Specialized Pitch when I was looking for mountain bikes, and I thought that they were quite nice. They are responsive and they brake easily. They kind of have more of a SRAM guide feeling, where it's more modulated as opposed to the Shimano hydraulics, which are very on and off. Specialized dirt pedals, not a fan. I upgraded mine shortly after buying the bike, and I'm assuming most people will. So they don't really bother letting you have nice pedals with this bike because most people upgrade them straight away anyway. Same Shimano center lock, front and rear hub as on the Rockhopper, and yeah, that's all to really see. So let's move on to the Cannondale Catalyst 1. So the Cannondale Catalyst 1 looks pretty nice. It has cable-actuated disc brakes, and I believe it's also a 3x8 Acera drivetrain. This bike looks a little bit more cross-country-ish as opposed to the Pitch Sport, which looks like it could serve for light trail riding and cross-country. So this is a SR Centaur XCT with a 100 mils of travel and a hydraulic lockout. I believe it's the same fork as on the Pitch Sport. It has easy fire shifters, Shimano Acera, and Pro Wheel cranks. I haven't seen Pro Wheel cranks before, although I believe that they do come on some lower-end specialized bikes, like a hybrid that I've owned from them. So they come with hydraulic disc brakes, which is actually a huge plus, and brand name wheels. They have WTB SX19 rims. I've never heard of these, but I know from personal experience that WTB wheels and tires are very good. Let's see. Some hubs. You have Formula QR fronts. I don't know if Formula, or whatever that brand is a Cannondale thing or just some off-brand, but I've never heard of them. Comment down below if you know anything about them. So you got the Pro Wheel cranks, the Sunrace 11-34. So it's a 7-speed. So that's a 7x3. So you're getting hydraulic brakes and a name brand wheel set, but you're only getting a 7x3. So you really have to put a value on the drivetrain versus the brakes. Whatever you feel are most important. I personally don't really care. I mean, a 21 to a 24 speed, that's a 3-speed difference, so it's not going to make or break the bike. It has a front derailleur, the Shimano Tourney, so you're definitely seeing some compromises to make way for those name brand wheels and hydraulic brakes. Tourney isn't great, but it's acceptable for a bike at this price range. You know, for $630 versus the $625 Pitch Sport, you get a better drivetrain on here, but you get better brakes on here, and suspension is pretty much the same. Whatever you place a value on, I place a value on both brakes and drivetrain, so if possible, I would try to get both hydraulic brakes and a slightly better drivetrain. So you have a 1 1/8 inch straight steer tube, threadless. It's very common on this price range of bike. And you get Cannondale branded handlebars, and you get Cannondale grips. So yeah, Cannondale stem. Most of this stuff is Cannondale. So it looks like a pretty nice bike. I haven't ridden this bike, but I don't know anyone who has one actually. It looks okay, considering you get hydraulic brakes. That's a huge bonus at this price. But you have to place a value on the drivetrain as well. There are always sacrifices at this price range. And I believe that there's internal cable routing. There's internal cable routing on the Pitch. So for $5 less, you get internal cable routing and a slightly better drivetrain. But you don't get the hydraulic brakes that are featured on this bike. So, again, whatever's most valuable to you. Moving on to the Trek Marlin 6. I've test rode this bike, and I think it's a great bike. In the end, I decided to go with the Specialized, mainly because of brand loyalty, but also just because the shifting system on the Rockhopper stock was better than the Marlin 6, and I wasn't going to spring for a Marlin 7 at the time, because I didn't really see getting a better suspension when I didn't even know if I was going to like mountain biking or not. It was my first mountain bike, or real mountain bike, and I just really wanted to do some cross country, so I didn't want to pay around $100 extra for a nice RockShox suspension. I have ridden the Marlin 7, and I can say that it's a nice bike. I like the suspension. I believe it has an XC28 from RockShox, and it's a nice cross-country bike overall. But the Marlin 6, I test rode the 2017, and I chose the Rockhopper in the end because I really wanted that Acera. I believe that the Altus is a 7-speed. No, it's an 8-speed. So the one I test rode was a 7-speed, and I really just wanted that extra gear in the extra cog in the rear. So this bike has a 3x8, and it has Altus up front, Altus in the rear, Shimano branded crankset. Go into depth later. Internal cable routing, always a plus. Bontrager branded everything. The Bontrager XR2 tires are not bad. I personally like them. I think that they're pretty good stock tires. The compound isn't too rough or soft for my liking, and they're nice on XC trails. So it has an XCT, like most bikes in this price range. Let's see some of the specs. So it has an aluminum frame with the XCT30 coil hydraulic lockout fork with 100 millimeters of travel. Altus 8-speed, Altus in the front, Altus in the rear. You have a KMC chain, always a plus. Bontrager branded everything. 1 1/8 inch threadless is common. And you get Tektro HD 275s. So I have never tried these because the Marlin 6 that I tried last year had cable actuated disc brakes. But again, any hydraulic brakes are for sure better than cable actuated disc brakes. And it weighs 32 pounds, so that's pretty heavy. You have to put a value on weight, durability, and cost. I mean, as Keith Bontrager said, fitting because we're on the Trek website. Strong, light, and cheap, pick 2. In this case, you're getting strong and cheap, definitely not light. But for $630, this is right in line with the other 2 bikes, and it's priced competitively with hydraulic brakes, internal cable routing, and a 24-speed drivetrain. Seems like you really get everything. Usually Treks aren't such a great value. I would not pay some of the prices that they charge people for some of their bikes. But, it has rack mounts if you're going to be commuting. It has a kickstand mount, which I don't recommend if you're riding trails, but whatever makes you feel more comfortable. It's very competitively priced, and it looks like a very good bike for the money. Moving on to some used bikes. On the Pros Closet, my favorite website for buying used bikes, I purchased my road bike off here. We're only going to be looking at hardtails today, and I'll do another video on full suspensions if you're dead set on full suspension, but oftentimes, if you're just starting out, you don't need a full suspension because you're not going to be dropping off 6-foot ledges. You're going to be mostly doing XC and light trail. So, let's look at this Trek Superfly AL Elite. Excuse me. This is a 29er XC bike with a 3x10 drivetrain. So it has a DRXT in the rear, I believe, and it has a Fox F100 in the front, I think. So it comes with some really nice name brand parts like Maxxis tires, Fox suspension, and Shimano drivetrain, and hydraulic brakes, which is really nice. So you get a Fox 32 Float Evolution series, always nice to have an air fork. You get Shimano SLX hydraulic disc brakes, mechanical shifting from the SLX. I think you get 10 in the rear and 3 in the front. So kind of a touring type setup. DT Swiss wheel set, always a nice extra. I currently have a DT Swiss wheel set on my Rockhopper, and I have no complaints. You have the standard Bontrager fare, all of the Bontrager branded stuff that's expected. You have a Maxxis Ardent front wheel, tire, and you have the Bontrager EXP rear tire. You have a SRAM PC chain, and you have a Shimano 10-speed 11 to 36 tooth cassette. So if you like range, this is a bike for you. And it coming in at $711. It's more expensive than the other 2 options, but at the same time you get an air shock, you get a 10-speed drivetrain in the rear, you get hydraulic brakes, and while you don't get internal cable routing, depending on who you are, because some people don't like that to work on. I, for one, think it's a hassle to work on internal cable routing, but I'm willing to put up with it if it means a cleaner look on my bike and less chance of damaging cables and cable housing. So yeah, it looks pretty nice. It looks clean, and it doesn't look like it's been too dinged up. There's obvious signs of wear, but that means it's been used and, it hasn't really been sitting in a garage for years. And it just shows how good of a trail bike it is, cross-country trail. I'm pretty sure this bike can handle a little bit more than just standard cross-country. I think it also has a tapered steerer tube, which is always a plus if you want to upgrade the fork, because in today's world, tapered steerer tubes are everywhere, and it's getting harder to find a straight steerer tube fork. The chain set, the bottom bracket is also not the standard Octolink. No, it's not the standard square taper, which you usually get on a bike in this price range, which is always good because if you're thinking about upgrading it to a 1x or to a different crankset, because these have definitely seen better days, then good luck finding a decent crankset for a square taper drivetrain. It took me a long time, and even then I had to buy an older Truvative crankset for my Rockhopper. Alright, I'd like to thank you for watching, and ride safe! I hope this video helped you. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. See you next time!